Chapter 49, Echoes of Yesteryear. To back up a little bit, I had been on the trail of Bay and his henchmen for several months, but hadn't yet come up with any hard proof of them stealing cows. Then a few days ago, I had caught them red-handed on a dairy farm not far from Jim on the Beams. I was hiding behind some bushes on a hill overlooking their cargo ship. As far as I could tell, there were only Bay and two of his soldiers, 3 men in all. With my TPE training, I could handle all three blindfolded. I was about to move in and do my thing when out of the woods on the other side of the ship stepped the biggest man I'd ever seen in my long life. He must have been almost 8 feet tall and over 400 pounds, with none of that being fat. It was obvious I needed to rethink my position. That brings us back to Jim on the Beam's workshop, where I was fashioning a C3P, calcified cow chip projector. In other words, a slingshot. In less than an hour, I turned harmless wood and an old forgotten piece of strap into a formidable weapon. At least I hoped that I had. When Jim returned with the cow chips, I told him my plan. To his credit, he didn't flinch when I said his assignment was to hand me the chips when I hollered for them. We got in Jim's truck and headed for the Alpha Beta boys' current hiding place. We parked about a mile away and furtively advanced to where the cargo ship was docked. Bay's modus operandi was to rustle the cattle as the sun was beginning to set. Vision was less than optimal, but enough to see what was going on. We were situated about 100 feet from the ship, ensconced behind a very thick crepe myrtle. We soon heard the lowing of the cows. Both men and cows were coming into the clearing, but the giant wasn't with them. Maybe he was in the cargo bay, probably the only place on the ship that could accommodate him. As the cows were being herded into the door of the cargo bay, I suddenly started singing in my loudest voice, "Keep them doggies moving through wind and stormy weather. Head 'em up, move 'em out, rawhide." My voice started a stampede, and the rustlers scurried to get out of the way. Then it happened. The big giant came stomping out of the cargo bay straight for us. I cried out to Jim, "Hand me a chip." I put the chip on the strap, pulled back, and let it go. The first chip sailed harmlessly by the giant's head. Another one. I fired again, and this time I hit him square between the eyes. He fell with the impact of a sequoia tree to the ground. I kept firing chips, and soon Colonel Isimo Bay and the two soldiers surrendered. "You have defeated us, my friend. I should have kept you in prison." I don't think he liked admitting he had been defeated. I spoke to the two soldiers. "Haul that hulk into the ship." Looking straight at Bay, I said, "You got 2 minutes to get the hell out of here, and don't ever come back." Chapter 50. Perish the thought. I rode back to Jim on the Beam's house, where he was nice enough to put me up for the night. His wife, Jan, cooked a fine supper, and afterwards we sat on the front porch in rocking chairs that Jim had bought at Snobby Lobby. Miss Adventure had recently opened up a new store in Sigma Delta Pi. Of course, as soon as it opened, another Snobby Lobby type store called Our Stuff Ain't Their Stuff opened across the street. I was burning up somewhere in one of the many deserts on Sigma 2 when all this happened, so I didn't get to see Frank and Miss Adventure. Jim asked me, "Where are you headed from here?" "You tell me. Are more cows north, south, east, or west?" "There's a big cattle ranch, both dairy and beef, about 40 miles northwest of here," Jim replied. "How big is it?" I asked. "Oh," Jim mulled the question over for a few seconds. "I say 5,000 acres or more. That's where I'll go." Walking northward in the rustic countryside the next day, I started having qualms about the recent dust-up with the ABC gang from Sigma 4. Their defeat had gone a little too smoothly. Was their rustling activities merely a distraction from a more sinister operation going on elsewhere on Sigma 3? I had no way of knowing. All I could do was keep my eyes and ears open for any perturbations in the force. I walked 20 miles with no cow sightings. I made camp in a pecan grove. Some pecans had fallen to the ground, and I had them for supper. There were some oak trees along the banks of a nearby stream, but I didn't disturb the acorns for fear of angering the squirrels. The following day, I stumbled into an outdoor festival where there was a competition going on. Who cooked the best barbecue briskets? Every cook was offering free samples, and I took advantage of their hospitality. I wouldn't want to be a judge. Every brisket I tasted was excellent. One thing, though, I could have sworn that some of the beef tasted like pork. I talked to a lot of the Sigmas in attendance. A few of them were dairy farmers, and I asked them about the state of milk production. Every one of them said the same thing: production is going down every year. Chapter 51, Constitutional Crisis. The hint of pork taste lingered in my mouth. That taste, along with my concerns about the ABC gang being a distraction, initiated a series of thoughts in my mind. My TPE instinct was telling me something, but I wasn't able to decipher it. Then one thought dominated my mind. I must go at once to the capital, Sigma Delta Pi. Something momentous was on the verge of happening there. I couldn't use the SPNV, and remember, it didn't really exist anyway, so I asked around if anyone at the barbecue competition was driving back to Sigma Delta Pi after the competition was over. After 30 minutes of frantic searching, I found a couple of barbecue lovers, Clyde and Millicent Redundancy. They lived in the suburbs of Sigma Delta Pi, and they planned to drive all night to get back home. I said, great, and we took off. It was a 12-hour drive, and I slept most of the way, but I did wake up in time to ask a few questions on how the government of Sigma 3 was run. Here's some of what they told me. There's one world government and one world capital, Sigma Delta Pi. The one world government works because even though Sigma 3 is about the same size as Earth, it only has 500 million people. The reason for the small population is that Sigma 3 was colonized by settlers from the Tau Ceti system only a few hundred years earlier. These settlers were asked to leave the Tau Ceti system because they were aggravatingly competitive at all times of the day and night. The Sigma 3 government is comprised of judges, legislators, and a chief executive called the champion competitor, or as the Sigmas call him or her, the champ. An election for the champ is held every 3 months because Sigmas love the excitement of competitive elections, and they don't like to wait too long between them. Any Sigma once out of puberty can run, which means the winner can win with as few as 100,000 votes. The champ can be re-elected as many times as possible. Term limits are not acceptable because they limit competition. My brain filled with the above information, the redundancies let me out on Main Street of Leaf Blower, a suburb of Sigma Delta Pi, in the wee hours of the morning. Well rested from sleeping in the car, I walked briskly to Sigma Delta Pi, where I discovered a protest occurring on the main plaza in front of the Capitol building. The protesters were shouting, 4 years, 4 years. I walked among the crowd, which at the moment was peaceful. I spotted a woman, a little frumpy with an unhappy face, passing around to the crowd what looked like brick-colored strips. I got into position where I was eligible to receive one. I tasted it. It was bacon. I immediately ran up the steps to the Capitol building and entered through the front doors, asked to see the champ. And much to my surprise, I was promptly ushered into his office. When he saw me, he said, "How about a game of ping pong?" I said, "Sir, there's a bacon revolution going on." He replied, "Oh, you mean those protesters? Aren't there two groups protesting against each other in good Sigma 3 fashion?" "No, sir, they're protesting together." "What? They're not competing against each other to see who the best protesters are? That's against the law. What do they want?" I replied, they're shouting 4 years. I think that means they want the champ's election, they want the champ elections every 4 years instead of every 3 months. The champ said, that's the most undemocratic as well as most uncompetitive thing I've ever heard of. I asked, what do you suggest be done? Invite whoever's in charge of the protest up to my office, and I'll challenge him or her to a game of billiards. Winner take all.